Hey everybody, welcome to Author Talk. We're talking about our beautiful anthology Just YA and meeting the authors who have generously contributed stories and poems and essays to this collection for you, for teachers, for students. And today Jen Ferguson is joining us to do a little reading and so we can get to know her and get to know her stories, and I'm just super excited. So Jen, welcome, and
Hi,
tell us a little bit about you. Where are you in the world?
um, I'm Jen Ferguson. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where I teach fiction writing at Co-College. This is my puppy Bram. He is like 14 weeks old and doesn't know how to Zoom yet, but he's going to learn some Zoom manners today. We're working on it.
Wonderful. What does that class look like that you're teaching? I mean, I don't know that many English teachers ever get to take a fiction writing class. I'm always fascinated by that. I think I would love to take that. Actually, my plans is to do that soon.
Yeah.
What happens in a fiction class?
In my fiction classes, we start by reading things together. So I'm teaching a novella class right now, which is like a really short novel. And we read a bunch of them together and we talk about them and we think about what they do. And then I have my students writing their own novellas. So we have a couple writing days throughout the semester where they get to sit down and do some writing. And at the very end of the semester, the last couple weeks, we're going to do a workshop and everyone's going to read each other's first chapters or so in their novellas. And hopefully, when they leave class, they're so excited they want to keep working on it.
Okay, that sounds wonderful.
It's so much fun.
That sounds wonderful. Um, so can you tell us a little bit about how you became a writer or how you came to say, I am a writer and be a writer?
Yeah, I think that I always was really comfortable calling myself a writer. Um, in high school, I was writing novels instead of hanging out with my friends, which should say something about who I am. But like my first internet banking secret question was, what do I want to be when I grow up? And it was an author or a writer, depending on where I was. So I sort of always knew it was the path for me. And I was sort of always writing stories.
And did you have people reading them or did you write them for yourself?
In high school, I was totally writing them for myself. I didn't revise them. I had no interest in going back to them. I just loved the worlds I created and reading them and rereading them. And then when I went to undergrad, I didn't do any creative writing. Instead, I started writing for like the school newspaper and for the different magazines at the colleges. And I was writing like nonfiction reviews of books or rants about construction, never ending construction. So I started writing for the public in a very different way. It wasn't actually fiction writing or nonfiction, or it was nonfiction. It just wasn't really narrative nonfiction. It was like consumable things for the public. And that was my first real audience.
Mm, nice. And then when did you feel like I'm going to get an agent or I'm going to make a go of this?
I finished my undergrad degree and didn't know what to do with my life. So I went to grad school and I knew that I didn't want to just study literature critically. I wanted to be writing. So I went to a program that had an MA in English and creative writing. And that was sort of the first time that I spent real time working on my writing and revising it in a community. Um, and sort of after that, I knew I was hooked. I knew what I wanted to do, but the path to getting an agent isn't always direct. Sometimes it's really slow. For me, it was 7 completed novels before I wrote The Summer of Bitter and Sweet. And that was the novel that got me an agent and got me my first major book deal. So it took a long time.
Hmm. Well, I'm so glad that the book did make it into the world, and I love it. I love that book, and I spent
Oh,
a summer, a much needed time listening and walking with your book.
oh, thank you. The audiobook narrator, Julie Lumsden, is like
Yeah,
such a star.
yeah, yeah.
She's on the Stratford Festival right now. in Ontario acting, and the Stratford Festival is like such a huge deal.
Oh, it was yeah, it was beautiful and I just like it was perfect because the summer had just begun and I was walking these roads in Oklahoma that are just, tumbleweeds and
Yeah.
it was just a perfect setting for me. So that was a wonderful memory that I have. Well, I would love for you to share. Oh, well, I guess how did you come to learn about the Just YA anthology or that this open education resource existed? Do you remember?
Yeah, so I got an email from some students who must have been working with you. And then I got an email from you directly because we've communicated about something before, which meant that I sort of heard it the first time. And I sent it along the way to some of my YA writer friends who were like, oh, I only have novels. I don't have anything that fits, but this is cool.
Mm.
And then by the time I got an email directly from you, I was already searching through my collection of previously published stories and essays that were small or tiny, or maybe were published for adults originally, but were things that cared about young people and were speaking to young people. And I found a few of them and I sent them off.
Yes. Well, I'm so glad that you did. And I'm so glad that your voice and your characters are in the book. So I wonder if you want to say a little bit about it first, or if you want to read first.
Maybe I'll say a little something first. Let me just see if I can get my document
Okay.
parallel to this screen so I can both look at you and read. All right, that was successful. Um, so I'm going to read Stupid Girls, which is a real story about me and my best friend. We were maybe 19 going canoeing in Algonquin Provincial Park. And you can't plan for the weather. We were out in the backcountry for 2 weeks. And this story begins on our last day. It's a Sunday. It's a Sunday, and we need to get home because school starts on Monday. Okay. Stupid girls. One, to collect our lost things, Forrest drove us along the abandoned railway. The rain slowed, the lake calmed, and while Forrest drove, he flirted and teased us for not being stupid girls. And still, that's what I remember most. Not the portages that hadn't been cleared of free fall or the interior of the park, wild and quiet, but how things always seemed more serious in the rain. And how Forrest, older than us by a year or two, how he admired the stupid girls he wished we were. Two, before our unplanned hike, before the rain, we laid in our two-person tent and I told stories about the bear who killed maimed boys years back on this very lake, about how when I sleep in Algonquin Provincial Park, I always think of Wendigo whitewashed and safe on TV. Three, crushing loose gravel piled along the tracks, we dreamed out loud of penne alla arrabbiata, unlimited breadsticks from that fast food Italian place. Carbs would warm us. When we found the cabins old enough that they predated the parklands, first we knocked on doors, our teeth chattering. Four, all this cottage country was locked up tight. They're gone for the season, my best friend said. I nodded toward a window. Should we? If we get inside, we'll leave a note. Five, once we met a grizzled man who lived inside the boundaries, who named his son Forrest, as if this wasn't too pointed. Once, after a series of late August thunderstorms drove the moose into hiding, my fingers cramped around my paddle until I couldn't unclench them. Once, we left our rented canoe in the brush, along old train tracks, like we were writing a bad nature poem.
And when you reread that, what stands out to you?
Um, Something that stands out to me is that I have always said I'm not a poet and that I don't write poetry, but I forget how poetic language becomes in my fiction, especially when I'm talking about wild places and landscapes that I really, really love. Algonquin is like one of my favorite places in the world. So when I write about it, all this lush description comes out.
It really does. It does. And I think, well, we asked about, like, I asked for, poems and fiction and creative nonfiction, and I think I'm a little opposed to like sorting things in that way.
Me
Um,
too.
though I know teachers look for them and they're looking for something specific. And a lot of our like curriculum is organized in that way too. Like we're writing
Mm-hmm.
fiction or writing creative nonfiction. But I love that this is here, and that it looks like a story with the chapters kind of, and
Sort
it
of.
and it looks like a poem in the white space that's around it. And it reads that way too. Um, and it has such reflection in it. And I think what I love to see is a teacher saying, let's read this piece by Jen Ferguson alongside a couple others and say what helps you tell the story that you want to tell, right?
Right.
And in these different scenes and like spatial scenes and temporal scenes and as well.
Yeah. So I think that the other thing that reminds me of a poem there is that it doesn't move from beginning to middle to end linearly. The story sort of bounces back and forth in the scenes, which, if you're not familiar with poetry, you might not key into what's happening. You might think, but she just said this happened. So where am I in time?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's fun to me. It's a little puzzle to put together.
It is. It is. I think and I think it's worth, as you said, when you start your fiction class, that we're going to read some things first and think about what are people doing and then where are the things that we can kind of imitate and borrow if it fits with the story that we want to tell, or
Right.
how might if we try it change what we say or think, right?
Yeah.
I love this piece so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to read another?
I really don't. That story doesn't read very well.
Okay.
There's so much dialogue and interrupting each character that I find it just doesn't read out loud well.
Okay, that's okay. I will put links in the comment section below, so that we can have access to them. Do you want to say anything about it?
So that story I ended up writing for the CBC after the Summer of Bitter and Sweet won the Governor General Literary Award for young people. So those are characters from the Summer of Bitter and Sweet who are side characters who are really fun. And when I was asked to write a flash fiction thing on the idea of healing, I thought, oh no, I can bring these two characters back because they have really interesting things to say about what it means to be young and a woman and native, and the idea that native people are expected to be resilient,
Hmm.
and that resilience is sort of like a thing you're expected to have. But the story sort of thinks through ideas about resilience maybe being a short-term coping mechanism, and that some of us in the world have been asked to do it all the time.
I love the title of it. The story is against resilience, supports screaming as needed.
Yeah, I wanted to say something really loud, and the Canadian Broadcasting Company gave me a microphone, so I did.
Love it. I'm glad that you did. And I think that piece will resonate with a lot of students. And again, it's another example of a sort of flash fiction writing that is not happening in a lot of classrooms today. There's a lot of nonfiction writing. There isn't a lot of support in looking at, um, even that. I think it's helpful to know that like a character from a long form book can make it into
Exactly.
this piece, and there's some fan fiction writing going on, I think, for students, but to have like a space in the classroom to really do that work and have a mentor text like yours is going to be so wonderful. I'm so grateful.
Yeah. I love telling my students they don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. You can take a story that you really love, um, and you can rewrite the Little Red Riding Hood story, and you can change something there that makes it brand new. And it doesn't have to be a 20-page story, it can be 750 words.
Yes, that's what we like. That's what we like. And I think for teachers who like sometimes we get caught up in like elaborate and say more, and sometimes less is more. And also
Hmm.
teachers who have 180 students can't read carefully or workshop carefully papers that are 10, 20 pages long, right? We need to do less and do better sometimes.
But this is also for the writer and their craft. It's
Yeah.
really hard to see the beginning, middle, and end of a long story
Mm,
at once. And when you're working with flash fiction, you can actually sort of see the beginning, middle, and end across 2 pages, which means that you can track what you're trying to do a lot easier and you can make choices a lot easier and not get lost in your own story.
yeah. Well, I was thinking, Padma Venkatraman also has a flash fiction piece that has sort of like these sections in them as well. I can see both of these side by side. In reading yours and in reading hers, I see each section, the numbers can be pulled out, and they're you're like, I can see this can be pulled out, and it could be a chapter. And this, it has a potential, and it works in both ways.
Right. So there's room for expanding, but right now it's sort of diluted into the sharpest
Yeah.
mini scene it could be. And if you wanted to expand it out, you could,
Mhm.
but there is joy in that sort of like diluted experience, the sharpness of it.
Yeah, I love it. And I like reread these, and it was a joy to hear you read it too. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Well, as we conclude, I wonder if you want to share what are you working on now? What's sort of happening in your life?
Okay, so you're not going to see this for a while, but today is September 24th, and today is my third YA book birthday. So my novel, A Constellation of Minor Bears, comes out today, and I am
Today? Oh my
celebrating
gosh.
today. I am celebrating by talking to you and hanging out with Bram. And so by the time you see this, you will be able to find A Constellation of Minor Bears in the local library and in bookstores. And Julie Lumsden is part of the audiobook of that one too. So
Oh
if
my
you've
God.
become a Julie Lumsden fan, more of her work is out in the world.
Do you want to say a little bit about the book?
Whoa. Whoa. Do I? Maybe? Okay, we'll try. Um, so it's about three teens who hike the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a 4 month long hike that starts at the border of the US and Mexico and goes all the way to the border of the US and Canada. And it takes about 4 months to finish it. This is their planned graduation trip, but um, as life happens, some things have changed. So Molly ends up on this trip. She's 17. She just graduated high school a year early, and she's walking around awfully angry at the world. She's angry at her brother for having an indoor climbing accident, and he developed a serious concussion and brain injury from that. And she's angry at her brother's best friend for not stopping her brother from falling. And she's kind of angry. She's made some promises, like to become a doctor and serve her community, and she's not quite feeling them. So she's going to go for a really long walk and deal with some of her anger and resentment. And on the way, they meet a fellow hiker named Bryn, and Bryn brings some drama into their lives.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
This,
it's an adventure. It's an adventure. If you can't go for a 4 month hike, you read the book and go for a
oh,
hike with
yeah.
the
Yeah.
characters.
Yeah, I can see groups of students going on some version of that hike or going to certain spots along the trail that I'm sure they're thinking
Exactly.
of. Yes, yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I look forward to reading that and sharing it with my young adult literature class and
Ooh,
all the
fun.
students that I come in contact with. It's going to be wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, Jen.
Yeah, this was a treat. Thanks for putting up with my puppy and his slight Zoom misbehavior.
Oh, he's famous now. Famous.
Yeah, yeah. Bram, the famous pup.